Hello, everybody. Hi, hello. I'm Romina. I work for Macmillan Education, and welcome to today's session of Macmillan Education Live. We are, as usual, having this session a little bit late at night so that you have time to finish your day at school. And we are so happy today to see so many people. I'm looking at the comment section now, and I looked at a comment that says I can't hear anything. So just to make sure that you can hear me, just if you can comment that you can hear me actually, and we'll go on. Meanwhile, I'm gonna ask you where you're writing from. So I am from Monza. I live very close. Oh, thank you. Someone says yes. Okay, perfect. Okay, so maybe it was just a moment. All right. So I'm from Monza, and at the moment I'm in my house, and I don't actually live in Monza. I live very close to Monza. So it would be nice to understand where you're writing from. I can see so many different cities, so perfect. It's always so nice to see people from all over Italy. And I just would like to remind you that you're going to find your attestati in the attestati section on Mondadori Education website. And you can also find the recording with the same link that you used today. So you'll be able to find the recording on the Mondadori playlist on YouTube. Now, today we are going to be joined by our speaker, David.
Hello.
Hi,
I hope everybody can hear me.
Oh, Dave?
I'm still here.
You're still here. Okay.
Perfect. I'm not touching anything.
All right, perfect. So, hello, Dave. How are you? All good?
I'm good. I'm feeling good after my trip to Italy. Yeah.
Yeah, we're so happy because we had a very nice week in Italy a couple of weeks ago. From Naples to Verona, we had the Macmillan Days face-to-face. And now we are so happy that you are back with us online. So thank you very much for being here. And thank you, everyone, for being here with us tonight. So I'm going to leave you the stage and then I'll be here if you need anything, or if maybe some help is needed from my side. I'm gonna be here following, and then I'll pop in at the end just to just for some final comments and just to recap everything. So enjoy your sessions, guys, and see you later. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Romina. Good, and my presentation is just brilliant. Perfect. Thanks, as Romina says, thanks to everybody for coming. Obviously, I know that we're all busy during the day, so it's very good of you to watch this webinar after your working teaching day. And I hope it's a webinar which makes you feel good about being a teacher. You can see from the title, Feeling Good, You Should. Because today I'm going to be talking about how amazing we are, and if you didn't know it already, and explaining why English teachers are so important and so special. I do, by the way, love people making comments in the chat box. I can see chat box now with people saying where they're from. So I will ask you lots of questions, and I would really appreciate it if you could reply in the chat box from time to time so that I know that you're still with me and still listening to me. Okay, last year I gave a webinar for Macmillan Italy, which was all about oracy. And in fact, I think I've given many webinars for Macmillan Italy, and I've talked, I think, about grammar, about vocabulary teaching, about social and emotional learning, about critical thinking. And this session is a little bit different because I'm not talking about one specific area of English language teaching today. I'm talking about the whole big picture. I'm talking about what it is like to be an English language teacher. And I think it's important maybe to explain the inspiration behind my talk. There was one thing in particular which inspired me. I travel around the world a lot because Gateway, my course for Macmillan Mondadori, Gateway is sold in many countries around the world. So, for example, I've been to Russia many times, and I've also been to Ukraine many times. And when the war broke out, I was asked by Macmillan Ukraine to give a talk online for their teachers. And I found that it was quite difficult to decide what to talk about, because I think to talk about the present perfect, or to talk about phrasal verbs, or to talk about even critical thinking at a moment when, as you can see from my slide, teachers were teaching in bunkers or teaching in underground stations, I decided that I wanted to give a talk which was just reminding them how amazing they were, because they were doing an incredibly important job in terrible conditions. So that was really my point of inspiration, simply remembering how important their job is. And that's, of course, made me think that, yes, what we do as English language teachers is very, very important in the whole world in 2026. The other point of inspiration is my wife. So my wife, by the way, I teach in Spain, just outside Madrid. My wife was a teacher of English for 36 years. And 2 years ago, she retired. And when she retired, we went to a special event in the city where she used to teach. And the mayor of the city made a very nice speech, basically saying that teachers are incredible, teachers do a very important job, that where would we be without teachers? And it was a very nice speech, but it made me think that I think teachers need to hear how important we are when we are actually teaching, because teaching can be a difficult job, it can be a challenging job, and it's nice to know that your job is appreciated when you are still teaching and not when you've just finished teaching. So I decided to write this talk as a way of thanking you all as practicing teachers, and just reminding you myself about how important we all are. My talk will also be a little bit unusual today, because sometimes I'll be talking about some things that are very small and maybe possibly a little bit silly. And then I'll be talking about things that I think are incredibly, incredibly serious. So from time to time, I'll be trying to make you laugh as well as think. But then at other times, I'll be talking about incredibly serious subjects. Let's begin with some light, small, amazing skills that we have. They're small, but like interesting. Now, I'm going to show you a slide, and I want you to tell me, you don't have to write the whole thing, but just tell me, do you understand what it says on the slide or not? So yes or no. Okay, if you have a look at that, just tell me when you can, yes or no. Can you understand what it says or not? So in the chat box, if you can just give me a yes or no. Yes, okay, thank you. I think Simona, I think. Yes, thank you, Paula. Yes, Monica as well can read it. Now, I think this is one of our small superpowers. I suddenly realized one day when I was correcting my students' work that I was sitting opposite them, but I could still understand everything they were writing, even though for me it was upside down. So this is a small, silly little super skill that I think all English language teachers have. We can actually read upside down because we have to read upside down when we are facing our students. Now, what about this? Did you ever receive an essay like this during COVID? Because another superpower that I discovered was that I could actually read essays like this. my students were sending me these terrible photographs. You can even see at the top the tablets and the whiting correction fluid. Terrible photo, but in the end, I learned to read essays like that. It always reminds me of Star Wars, you know, when Star Wars begins at the beginning, and I was receiving these photos, and somehow I managed to understand them. What about this? Now, this is another superpower that I developed during COVID. So when I was teaching online, I'm sure you found the same. That one of your superpowers was recognizing your students just from the top of their head. Sometimes you didn't even see the top of their head. You could just see the ceiling of their living room or their bedroom, and you would know just by looking at the top of the picture who the student was. So another little superpower that we developed during COVID. I'm sure you would agree that that was something that we all learnt to do. Now, I believe also that teachers have a sixth sense. We have a special power. Now, what I mean, I want you to imagine this situation. You're correcting yesterday's homework, and yesterday's homework was a workbook exercise. And you choose a student and you say, what's the answer to question 6, Ivan? Okay, so you ask that question, and Ivan says, oh, teacher, that's the only one I didn't do. You can tell me in the chat box if this ever happens to you. How did you know that Ivan didn't do that question? It seems like a special superpower, right? That you decided to choose Ivan out of the whole of the class. You decided to choose Ivan to answer question 6 of that exercise. Of course, and I don't think I need to explain this to you, it could be true that Ivan is lying. So I always say to students like this, I say, don't worry, it doesn't matter. Can you tell me the answer to question 7? And obviously, some students will then have to confess to the truth, which is that they never actually did any of the exercises, okay? But yes, right, that's good. Michela, yeah, you tell them you have a not done detector. That's very clever too. Another special superpower. Now, another superpower that I have, and I'm sure you have too, this is a different situation. Your students are doing, for example, a speaking activity. And what happens to me is when I'm standing at the front of the class, the students who are in front of me are all speaking in English, but the students at the back of the class are speaking Spanish. And then something strange happens. When I start moving to the back of the class, suddenly all my students at the back start speaking in English, and all of the students at the front start speaking in Spanish. It's crazy, right? I wonder what it is. What is the explanation? I call it the invisible English force field. So it's something that simply happens. Wherever you walk, the students who are closest to you are the ones who speak English, and the ones who are further away speak in Spanish. So it's obviously some special power that we all have. Now I'm going to show you a photograph where I'm sure you're going to recognize yourself. Do you recognize yourself in this photograph? Sometimes our students are saying, Dave, what's the word? How do you say this in English? What does this word mean? And you tell your students, I am not a walking dictionary. But sometimes we have to admit that simply we are incredible walking dictionaries. Students just ask us questions all the time. They think that all we are is a dictionary on legs. Another superpower. We are transformers. What do I mean with we are transformers? What I mean is we transform our students in different ways. And I think one of the most important ways that we transform our students is things like energy levels. So for example, today is, what day is it today? Today is Monday, right? So Monday morning, your students, when they came into class, you can tell me in the chat box, but were they full of energy or were they half asleep? I mean, I think it's a stupid question. I can imagine that probably most of them were half asleep, especially after the weekend. So what we have to do as teachers is somehow transform them so that they're suddenly like paying attention and they're listening and they're doing things. And what I want to do now is to share some activities with you that help me to boost energy levels. Yes, as Pier Paolo has just said, energy, what? Exactly. So here are some activities. Now, let's see if we can do some of these activities, even we can do them online. Let's see what happens. Let's do this activity. So this is a brainstorm activity. The way that I would explain this is that I would do this activity in groups or in small groups or in pairs. And we would do this as a race. So it's brainstorming. You have to think of 10 words in a category, and the first group to get to 10 wins. So simple game. But the idea is that the students will be competing. There will be a race. There will be some kind of creative and challenging thinking going on. We're going to do this because we're not in a classroom. We're working online. We're not going to wait until we get 10 ideas. I want you to immediately in the chat box write anything that you can think of that fits in my category as fast as you possibly can. Okay, so this will raise your energy levels because you're going to have to type very, very fast, because if anybody repeats a word, we have to think of another word. Okay, so can you think of anything that is typically green, typically the color green? In the chat box, as fast as you can, write down a word. And if somebody puts a word down, the same word, you have to think of a different word. Let's go, as fast as you can. Let's see this energy. Grass, thank you, Letizia. That was very, very fast. A leaf, thank you, Rafaela. Excellent. Kiwi, that is nice. Yes, kiwi. Fields, exactly. Cucumber, that's a nice one. Apple. Salad. You know, I think that when I was doing this 2 weeks ago in Italy, most people say food. I think that's because Italy is probably the best country in the world for food. So let's think of things that aren't food. Okay, so no more lettuce, courgette. I like grass, salad. Can anybody think traffic light? That is brilliant. That is brilliant. Lettuce, definitely still on the food. Artichoke, still on the food. Broccoli, salad. Aliens, I love that one. Aliens, that is brilliant. Frog, absolutely. Okay, some tent. Oh, are tents typically green? I mean, they can be green, right? But like, we would have to decide if that one's okay. Basil is good. Frog. Okay, so you get the idea, right? It's a race. So I want you to imagine doing this in your class. Students are working in pairs, small groups. They're going as fast as they can. And as soon as they get to 10, they shout, stop. Gloria, you have just said ogre, and somebody last week said Shrek, which I thought was a great answer also. Shrek is a beautiful example of something that is typically green. Actually, somebody also said last week envy, right? That's a nice answer. Envy is green. And also people who are new at doing something are also green, right? We say that he's green. So it's a simple activity, but the point that I want to make is that by doing activities like this, we increase the energy levels. Let's do one more, okay? Oh, wait, one more. It's not on my slide, but I'm going to say one more. Can you think of anything that typically has more than 4 legs? More than 4 legs. What do you reckon? More than 4 legs. That's a bit more difficult, right? What has more than 4 legs? An ant has more than 4 legs. Thank you, Rafaela. A spider. Caterpillar is nice. Lots of spiders. Okay, the good thing, bee is nice. Yeah, lots of insects. Also, for example, a long table. A long table might have more than 4 legs. Also, the answer that I like the most is a football team, right? A football team has more than 4 legs. Now, the thing about this is you can carry on answering while I'm continuing explaining the game. Of course, we could simply make this game give me 10 different types of transport. The only difficult thing with that is that it's more like a typical vocabulary exercise. It feels more like work than a game. So I like doing this activity with slightly unusual categories. So things that are typically green, things that have more than 4 legs. I love the answer 2 chairs, by the way. I think that is a brilliant answer. We could have, for example, things that are bad for the environment. So before we begin a text about the environment, we could simply brainstorm the category. And the point I want to make again is simply that these activities will transform energy levels, particularly with secondary students. Now, here's another activity which really focuses the student's attention. This is going to be difficult to do online, okay? This is much easier to do in your class because, by the way, when you do this in class, you'll notice to what extent your students are really paying attention to you and watching you. But this is read my lips, because I'm going to say the name of a fruit, but I'm not going to say it. You have to read my lips, and in the chat box, as quickly as you can, which is my fruit, okay? I'm going to move a little bit closer to the camera. I've never done this online, by the way. This could be quite exciting, but what fruit am I saying? What type of fruit, okay? Watch my lips. Anybody think they know what that was? I'm going to get a bit closer again. So you're reading my lips. Obviously in class, people will be shouting out, thank you, Manuela. You were the first person to answer. Alessandra as well. Okay, second one. The first one was apple. Next one, watch my lips closely. This is interesting to know if I can do this online or not. First time ever. Okay, I've done this a million times in class. The one after apple. Yes, thank you, Simona. Again, very good. Orange. I'm going to do one more because I think you get the idea, okay? Watch my lips for the third and the last word, okay? I think that one's an easy one. So we've had apple, then we had orange, and my third one is, I'll do it again. Anybody think? Yes, thank you, Gabriela. Right now, of course, this works totally different online and in class. Try this tomorrow. One thing that I always have to explain, you must always tell your students what the category of words is, because if you don't know the category, it's incredibly difficult. When you know that all the words are fruit, or all the words are types of transport or adjectives of personality, it's easy or easier. But if you don't know the category of words, it's very difficult. Try this activity tomorrow even. What group of words will you choose? Well, I recommend choosing the group of words that you taught yesterday or last week. So you're doing some useful vocabulary revision. You're doing some useful pronunciation practice by simply repeating the word. You're also looking very closely at my lips. But what you'll notice is the effect on the class is that you have all the students shouting out together, and they're all paying attention and watching really carefully. So what you're doing is you're pulling the class together. There are moments, I think, in the class when we start to lose control of the students. Each student is doing something different. But this activity is one that brings everybody together. So you're transforming the attention of the students. They're slightly not focused. They're doing different things. Do this activity and you'll see how you bring everybody together with you. And the students enjoy shouting out the word because they want to show how clever they are, that they know what the word is. Okay, let's just do one or two more activities like this that I would like you to try out in your classes this week. Activities which are designed to raise energy levels and get students tuned into the class. I call this activity UBAT, which is basically taboo backwards. I'm sure many of you play the game Taboo. You can tell me if you do in the chat box. In Taboo, you have a card, right? And the card has a word that the student has to explain to the class, or to his partner or to a small group. And they have a list of 5 words that they are not allowed to say when they explain the word at the top. So if the student has to explain cat, they cannot say pet, animal, mouse, meow, or feline. Now, I have always enjoyed this game, but often I have, I've played it so often that I wanted to change the game around a bit. So I changed it by reading out the 5 words to the students, and the students have to guess what the key word is. So if I said to you, if I said to you, world, treasure, lost, navigation, atlas, what do you think the word at the top of my card would be? World, treasure, lost, navigation, atlas. Does anybody think they know what the word is? I mean, there could be more than one possibility, but the actual word that was on my card was one specific word. Any idea what it was? It wasn't island, in fact, no. No, not island. Not ship either. Again, it could be, but it's not. It wasn't the original word. Not treasure island, and treasure you're not allowed to say. Not treasure, not island, not ship. This is interesting. This is there are lots of good words, but they're not the word that was on my card. Yes, Rafaela has it. It was map. The word was map. Your other words, by the way, are good, and I'll talk about this in a second. Your other words were good, but they weren't the words on they weren't the word on my card. So you have a map of the world. You have a treasure map in stories. When you are lost, you use a map. When you use a map for navigation, and an atlas is a book of maps. Let's do another example. So I'm going to read this to you. It's not on my screen. I'm going to read it to you, and I want you to shout out what you think the word is. When I say shout out, I mean shout out in the chat box. Lizard, monster, extinct, prehistoric, and Tyrannosaurus. So what do you think the word could be? I'll read them again. Lizard, monster, extinct, prehistoric, and Tyrannosaurus. And Leticia has the correct answer, which was dinosaur. Dinosaur was the correct answer. Nice answer. Okay. So you get the idea, I hope, of how we can play taboo backwards. But there's another way that we can adapt the game, which I actually prefer. This is my favorite. The second way to change taboo around is that you have the keyword, you tell the students the keyword, and the students have to guess which are the 5 words on my card. So I'd like you to imagine that the top word is teacher. What words would you expect to be on my card? Can you just put some ideas in the chat box? So for example, if you have to explain teacher, which do you think are the best 5 words? Students would be a good word. School would be a good word. Yes. Chalk would be a nice word too. Yes. Lessons. These are all really good words. Yeah. Words that would work extremely well. Students. Yes. Lessons, school, board. Yes. Okay. Let's play this again then. I'm going to tell you the top word, and I want you to suggest which word you expect to be on my card. One thing that I will tell you, when you play this game in class, you must make it clear to your students that they might come up with perfectly good words, but they are not the words on your card. So just because the word that they suggest is not on your card does not make it an incorrect word. It's simply that it's not on the card. You can imagine the word teacher. There must be 20, 25, 30 words that would be very good to explain teacher. They're not all on the card, so there's only 5. So you explain to them that they might have a good idea, but it might not be the one that is actually on the card. Okay, I'm going to give one word, and I want you to shout out in the chat box what word you expect to be on my card. My top word is Bear, bear, B-E-A-R. Okay, B-E-A-R. What would you expect to be on my card for the word bear? B-E-A-R. Let's see. Honey, that's a great word. It's not actually on my card, but I like that. Honey is a very good word. I think you're thinking of Winnie the Pooh, right? Forest is not on my card. Wood is not on my card. Fur is not on my card. Teddy is on my card. Very good. So we've got one, Teddy. Somebody said North Pole. Now, actually, you're getting closer. Hares is nice, but it's not there. So at the moment, we only have one, which is Teddy. Polar is on my card, so that's two. So we've got teddy bear, polar bear. Wild is on my cards. That's also, yes, that's four. And we only need one more, right? Think of another type of bear. Think of China. Who's going to be the first with that big clue? It's not white. Pause. Again, this is exactly what I was saying. These are great words, but they're not the words on my card. The last word, thank you. Somebody, Mikol, I think, has just said panda. Panda was the last word on my card. Right. Now, let me go back to explain why I am doing this game. Today, in a sense, the games that I'm showing are a little bit irrelevant. All I want to point out is that the same as you are very active at the moment in the chat box, your students will be very active in the classroom. And so that Monday morning feeling when the students are half awake, I would say to you, try these activities on Monday morning or tomorrow morning and see which work for you. But these are all activities which help me to transform the energy levels of my students. Now, sometimes you might agree with me that sometimes the problem is not that they are half asleep. Sometimes the problem with teenagers is that they are too awake and too excited and they have too much energy. Maybe towards the end of the day, Wednesday afternoon, the students are very chaotic. There's a lot of noise and you want to cool them down. And we often talk about warmers, which get the students excited, but I think it's also important to talk about coolers, activities which make the students focused. And one great way to focus the students' attention is dictation. And I think we stopped doing dictation for various reasons, but doing challenging dictations, I think, is a good way to get students paying attention, get them quiet. Warmers are often group activities, they are fast activities, they are noisy activities, and often lots of speaking. Dictation is good because it's generally quiet, because it's listening and it's writing and it's thinking and it's concentration. There is a simple way that we can change the traditional dictation. I'm going to suggest quickly two different types of dictation that work for me. One is opposites dictation. What happens is you dictate a simple text to your students, and the students write down not what you say, they write down the opposite of what you say. Now, before I give a little mini demonstration, let me just ask you a simple question. What is the opposite of man? In the chat box, what do you think, what do you consider to be the opposite of man? This is important for the activity, and I would explain this actually to my students. The same as I'm explaining it to you, I would give exactly the same explanation to my students. So we already have many people writing down the opposite of man is woman, and that's a very obvious answer. But does anybody have a different answer? Okay, everybody's saying woman, which is animal. So right, Teresa has said animal. So that's a possibility, right? We could say that the unman, I like that unman. Right, so we could have robots. Oh, that's nice as well. I hadn't thought of that. So far, I'm going to try and make this clear. The reason why I'm asking this question is because in this activity, the opposite of something is whatever you consider to be the opposite. There is no right or wrong opposite. So if you consider the opposite of man to be robots, that is perfectly good. If you consider the opposite of man to be alien, that is completely good. If you think the opposite of man is child, that is completely good. I hope I'm being clear, but you need to be clear with your students too, that the opposite is whatever they want to be the opposite. So what happens is, I'm going to semi-demonstrate this activity. For example, I will dictate the first sentence, and you don't have to write anything. You don't have to write anything in the chat box, okay? But the first sentence of my text is, every summer, John Smith goes to a school. Okay, so every summer, John Smith goes to a school. Now, what will happen is that each student will write down a slightly different sentence. Instead of every summer, some people might write every winter. Instead of every summer, some people might write once in the summer. Instead of every summer, some people might write down 3 or 4 times in the winter. So whatever you want to be, John Smith, what is the opposite of John Smith? It could be Peter Smith. It could be Mary Smith. It could be Anne Jones. It could be whatever name you like. Goes to a school. The opposite of goes could be doesn't go. The opposite of goes could be comes. The opposite of goes could be went. Instead of to a school, it could be to the school. Instead of to a school, it could be goes on holiday. So I hope I'm explaining this clearly. Simple text, simple dictation, but it's more challenging because the students are thinking of what is the opposite. After dictating 3 or 4 sentences slowly, you're going to discover that if you have 25 students, you're going to have 25 different stories in your classroom, which is great. From one simple text, suddenly you have lots of different variations. What I also do then is I ask the students from their dictation, which is the opposite of what I said, can they write down again exactly what I did say? In other words, go back to my original dictation. Now, the point that I want to make about this then is that the students are really concentrated. They're really listening hard. They're really focusing, and they're really quiet. And that's what I want. I said before that this is a cooler instead of a warmer. And some time ago, somebody suggested to me to look at every lesson plan you prepare and decide whether each activity would make the students more active or more focused. And it's a good idea, simply, even with your textbook, just making sure that you think you know the effect that each activity will have. Will it get their energy levels up, or will it get them focused? Monica has asked a very good question. This is a short text. Yeah, so it's a short story. In fact, I can read a little bit more of the story. My original story, you can make your own text, obviously. This actually came from Gateway A2. Every summer, John Smith goes to a school, but he doesn't study maths or English. It's a football school. So a very short story, very simple story, but yes, not individual sentences. But that actually brings me to my second dictation, which I call an opinions dictation. And this opinions dictation is single sentences. Now, I want you to imagine this is my blackboard, and I put on my blackboard 3 columns. I agree, I disagree, neutral, it depends. And I dictate some sentences, and the students write the sentence in the column that is true for them. So, for example, football players are paid too much. Football players are paid too much. So the students listen, They think, which is important. It's not just dictation and writing without thinking. They listen, they think, and then they write it in the column that they agree with. So, for example, I disagree, so I write it in the middle column. Football players are bad role models for teenagers. Football players are bad role models for teenagers. Well, I think it depends, because some are and some aren't. So I'm going to write it in the third column. So it's a dictation, but the students don't realize that it's a dictation. I hope, again, this is clear. Please tell me if it's not clear. In this case, we're dictating short, simple sentences all about a different topic. It could be the topic that will appear now in your textbook, in a reading text, for example. Give them 5, 6 sentences. The students listen and they write, and then compare with their partner. So they're comparing two things. When they compare with their partner, they're comparing that they wrote down the same sentence and they didn't make any mistakes, but they're also comparing if they agree or disagree, or if it depends. So we've got a dictation which is leading to communication. Thank you, by the way, for telling me that I'm clear. It's very late in the evening for me to make much sense, so I'm glad if I'm making sense and I'm being clear. Right, let's continue then. We've talked about transforming students who are half asleep. We have talked about transforming students who are too full of energy. Sometimes we can transform our students who are simply happy and relaxed and make them very unhappy, okay? So we have to be careful that we don't do this. So, for example, you might say this to your students one morning, and of course, suddenly they become your mortal enemies because you forgot to warn them about an exam. So this is a joke, but sometimes we have to remember to think of things from the student's point of view so that we don't make them particularly unhappy. Now, I'm going to come to a moment of my talk where I told you at the beginning I'm going to become very, very serious. I do believe that English teachers, we transform our students' lives. And we transform them because we are experts in English. And that is how we change our students' lives. How do we do this? Well, imagine your students. Today, in 2026, probably all of your students will need English to get a job. Or students will at least need English to get a better job, for example. Or students will need English to get promotion in a job. And because we know English, we can help them to know English, and that can help them in their lives to get a better job. It can also help our students to travel so that they can go to different countries and communicate with other people, because English today is totally a lingua franca. I think we also improve our students' lives because English is the international language of entertainment. So maybe we can help them to use English so that they understand more of a Taylor Swift song. I'm just saying this as an example. Some people learn or want to learn English so that they understand more of the Netflix series that they're watching. In other words, because English is so important in the world, we are transforming our students' lives. And that's thanks to us knowing experts, knowing English as experts. That's good to know, Francesca. Your English teachers changed your life forever. I think we sometimes, when we're thinking about precisely activities like the ones we've just seen, you think about the activity, but you forget the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is that our job is incredibly important because we know English and we can help our students to learn. So you don't need to be able to read this, but this is just an example of grammar. We know the difference between all of the different future forms. We know the difference between will and be going to, or between be going to in the present continuous. Or with vocabulary, we know the difference. We know what prefixes do. We know what suffixes do. So basically, because of our knowledge of English, we can really help our students. However, it's not just the fact that we know English, it's the fact that we probably feel passionate about English and passionate about the subject we teach and about teaching in general. In the last part of my session, I'm going to share different quotations from this amazing article, which was in The Guardian in 2017. It was an average school in London, and the journalists simply asked the students what they think makes a great teacher. And some of the quotations are really powerful. So I'd like you to look at this quotation. I never used to like maths, but our teacher is really passionate about maths, which is infectious. That's incredibly important, isn't it? This is a student who's saying this. So the difference between liking or disliking a subject is how passionate the teacher is about their subject. And I'm sure you guys who are listening to me today because you're interested in teaching, I'm sure that you're passionate and your students are realizing that passion. And that passion is just as important as our expert knowledge of English. I think we can also transform our students' lives, not just because we know English and because we're passionate about it, but because we know how to teach. Now, this sounds silly, but of course, I am a native speaker and a native teacher, but not all native speakers make good teachers. You are all good teachers because you studied how to become a teacher. In other words, simply knowing English is not enough. You need to be able to transmit that knowledge. And you can do that because you've learned how to do it. Again, if we look at this interview with students, it's about knowing how to put things across so students are interested in a way they can understand. In other words, a teacher could be an expert in linguistics. They could have a PhD and have written books about linguistics, but that might not make them a great teacher. A great teacher is somebody who can transmit their knowledge and make it easy for others to understand. And I'm sure that's what you can all do because you've learned how to do it. And if you haven't learned how to do something yet, you will learn how to do it. This is from the introduction of the teacher's book for Gateway to the World. Maybe before you used a particular book, you didn't know what a flipped classroom video was, but then you learn about it. For example, teaching online, I knew nothing about teaching online until suddenly COVID appeared, and then suddenly I learned how to teach online. At the moment, maybe you feel scared about using AI or not using AI, but I'm sure that in the future, we will all learn to do it. Why? Because we are passionate about our profession, and what we don't know now, we learn how to do for the future because we care about our students. I think another way that we transform our students' lives forever is helping them to pass exams, whatever that exam is. It may be an exam that you like or an exam that you don't like, but I think our obligation as teachers is to help each student to get the best possible results that they can according to their level and according to the exam that they're studying for. So we help our students by giving exam tips, exam hacks, strategies to pass exams, strategies that will help them to get the best possible mark. And I think this is really important because obviously we might not like the exam system and our students might hate the exam system, but we still somehow have to get our students feeling positive about exams. And when I say feeling positive about exams, I think it's good to talk about how they feel about exams. So you could try this questionnaire out with your students. They complete the sentences, compare answers, and then compare answers with you. But I've done this in class and it's fascinating how students answer number 6. I think we do exams at school because sometimes students do not have a very clear idea about why they are actually doing the exam. They think it is a form of suffering or a form of torture. But of course, students can actually learn by looking at their exams, finding out what they did well and what they did less well, and learning from their mistakes. So I think it's good to have the conversation with your students about how they feel about exams and how you can help them to feel less stressed and to get the best possible results. Another way that we can transform our students' lives is through what we teach, not just English, but what we teach by using English. When I started teaching English, we used to have lots of invented stories with invented characters in invented places. And sometimes it was funny, but sometimes it was just a bit stupid. Now I would say that in our English language textbooks, we're actually teaching something that can be useful for the students' lives. They can learn more about the world, and they can learn about what they need to know to survive, if you like, outside of school, after school, at university, or even in the world of work. So I think the content of what we teach has become really important. And it wasn't maybe 30 years ago. But the great thing about teaching English is we teach English and we can teach something else at the same time. This is an example of a lesson which is helping students to take important decisions in their lives. How can they do that systematically? How can they make the right choice when they have to face big challenges in their future lives? So in other words, English is important, but the things that we are teaching through English are also important. This refers back to my webinar last year, which was all about oracy. I think it's really interesting that I look at my students' essays in English, and their English is, maybe they're not writing in paragraphs and they're not using linkers. And then suddenly I see some of their writing in Spanish and realize that it's actually not that great. And I always thought that they could write perfectly in Spanish, but not write perfectly in English yet. Or, for example, public speaking, giving presentations. I have seen my Spanish students giving presentations in Spanish, and they're not actually giving the presentation very well. The great thing I think about English language teachers is we teach our students these things systematically. So we give them tips about giving presentations, about how to organize an essay. We structure everything for them. And that means that we are not just important because we are English language teachers. We are important, I believe, because we are language teachers. We help with L2 English, but we also help with L1. We also transform our students' lives, I think, simply with our experience, our example, our attitude, and by caring. And without caring, maybe there's no point in teaching, right? I think if you don't care for your students, it doesn't matter if you are an expert in the third conditional. The students simply want to know that you do care about them. This is one more quotation from this article, and I think this is really powerful. As you can read, really good teachers have a connection with their students. It's not like, hey, can I be your friend? It's small things they do, such as asking what you have next lesson, how your grades are, and how you feel you're doing, that add up to getting a real connection. You can tell me if you agree with me in the chat box, but that is incredibly important, isn't it? Simply the discussion sometimes with your students about how they're feeling, about whether they played basketball at the weekend, if they play the guitar, have they learnt a new song? That simple social chit chat, I think, is incredibly powerful in terms of motivating students. And again, you could technically be the best teacher in the world, but unless you show your students that you care about them as people, in my opinion, you're not going to get very far. And it's nice to see, although not very surprising, that you agree with me. Thank you for keeping me company in the chat box, by the way. I appreciate it. This was something which I received from a parent of a student. So it's in Spanish, obviously. Gracias por cuidar y enseñar, Alejandro. And when I received this, it just made me laugh, because it's cuidar y enseñar, for looking after and teaching Alejandro. And Alejandro, by the way, was 16, 17 years old. So he's not like a young child. But I think the order there is very significant also for the parents. Parents want us to take care of their kids and teach them both things, but both things are important. And we should never forget that, I think. Okay, and then I think that we can actually transform the world and shape the future. Cuidar is first, I agree. Cuidar is definitely first. Now, the Sustainable Development Goals, I know that sometimes we feel a little bit cynical about these and tired about them, but you'll see that the one thing I wanted to point out for you today is that number 4 there is quality education. And it does say in the United Nations document that without quality education, we cannot teach the other things, the 17 goals. In other words, quality education is key to all of those goals. Actually, I'm coming towards the end of my talk and I don't want to go over. So I'm going to skip a couple of things just so that we can make sure we finish on time, okay? One last thing. Somebody did say to me once that it's interesting to think that in our classrooms right now, we have the future leaders of any country. The next prime minister or president of Spain is in a classroom in Spain, and the future president or prime minister or tech wizard is in one of our classrooms now. So it's always interesting to think. There's a great quotation by somebody. It was, teachers cannot change the world, but we can change people, and people can change the world. And I just want to finish with one funny little thing that might make you laugh. I think that this is the last one that I'm going to talk about so that I finish on time. I think that teaching, it keeps you young, more or less, okay? I don't know, again, if you would agree with me. In the chat box, you can tell me. But I believe that teaching young people, one of the incredible superpowers we have is eternal youth. Because when we teach young people, I think their energy, their ideas, their originality, their creativity, all actually help me to keep a young attitude to life. So here is to teachers. Yeah, I did say more or less, Chiara. Yes. You see, there you are, Francesca. You feel young, exactly the same as me, and I'm older than you. So anyway, I have finished because I don't want to keep you over time. I don't know if anybody has any questions. Hi, Romina, you're back.
Hello, I'm back. I couldn't agree more, by the way. So I could see lots of comments. I actually saw a question while you were speaking about the exam part, the slides right before the exam part, where you were listing all the sentences.
Yes,
and one of the teachers asked, will they be separate sentences or a story?
Right, I think that was the dictation. Yeah, I think that was the dictation. Yeah, so you could do it either way, to be honest. It's basically, a dictation, but I would suggest doing a short little story.
Okay, perfect.
One suggestion, in fact, my example came from a lower level of gateway. One suggestion I have, because dictation can be difficult, is, for example, if you're teaching B2, find a simple text that you did, for example, in B1 or B1 plus, and use that text. Maybe there was a little story there, a mini text teaching vocabulary or grammar, and use that text rather than having to invent the story yourself. Just use any mini text that you've got in your book. But I would suggest making it slightly easier than the level of the students so that it's not incredibly difficult.
Okay. Thank you. I hope that answers the teacher's question, but I'm sure I'm sure it did. So thank you very much, everybody. I can see lots and lots of comments here with lots of thank you. So we're super happy, and thank you, Dave, of course. I cannot see any other questions, so I'll just wrap it up. So
thanks,
again,
thanks for inviting me, as always, Romina.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks for all the nice comments in the chat box. Yes, it's always a shame. I have too much to say and too little time to say it in, but that means I'll have to come back.
That's why we invite you every time, Dave, for you to finish all your your fantastic tips. No, we are really, really, really happy that everyone is liking the sessions, and that I'm not sure if some of the teachers were with us live
Right,
a
yes.
couple of weeks ago. If you were, thank you for coming back. If you weren't, thank you for being here. So that we promise we'll ask Dave again to be back. And once again, just would like to recommend everybody that your attestato will be in your attestati section on Mondadori Education. The recording will be available here again on the same link, so on the Mondadori playlist on YouTube. And about the slides, you are going to receive the slides as well. And thank you, Dave, for confirming it, by the way, because we always ask about that to our speakers, and they are always so kind to say yes. So thank you very much.
Actually, if anybody did need, if there was something that wasn't clear, you can always contact me on Facebook. So it's Teach with Dave. If you put Gateway Teach with Dave, you'll find me on Facebook.
Exactly. There's also this direct contact with Dave. So thank you very much, everybody. And we hope you'll have a great evening. And till next time, we're going to have another webinar in April. So we are going to send you all the details. So thank you very much. And bye, everyone. And thank you again, Dave.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. See you.
Bye-bye.